Imagine finding out your family left you out of Thanksgiving, leaving you to eat dinner alone in an empty restaurant. Now imagine discovering that everything you thought you knew about your own story was a lie. This is the story of how one lonely night changed my life forever. My name is Henry Cooper. I'm 30 years old, and I work as a financial analyst in Kansas City. On the surface, my life looked pretty solid. Decent downtown apartment, stable salary, a routine that worked. But have you ever felt like you were always trying to prove your worth to the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally? Warren and Barbara Cooper took me in when I was 8, and since then, I've been stuck in this constant loop of chasing respect. It felt like every day was a silent test I had to pass just to keep earning my place there. The little things started making more sense over time. Warren had this habit of calling my education an investment every time it came up, like it was a business deal. Barbara would smile, but it was one of those smiles that never reached the eyes. You know the kind, right? At family gatherings, they'd talk about Hannah, my adoptive sister, with genuine excitement that I rarely saw when the topic was me. There was a subtle but obvious difference in how they'd say, "Our Hannah," and just Henry. Every promotion at work felt like a performance, like I had to constantly justify why I was still part of the family. "Look how well he turned out," Warren would say to the neighbors, and I'd swallow hard every single time. Some nights, when the silence got too heavy, I'd wonder if this feeling of being rejected by my own family was real or just in my head. There were moments I felt like I was living a borrowed life, always trying to prove I deserved to be part of it. No matter what I achieved, it never seemed to bridge that invisible gap between us. Last fall, I decided to do something different for Thanksgiving. I wanted to organize a special dinner, show that I could contribute to our family traditions too. I searched for restaurants, found an amazing place overlooking the river, and pictured all of us gathered there. But here's what I didn't expect. Sometimes when you finally take that first step, that's exactly when you find out how people really see you. I was about to learn that lesson in the hardest way possible. I called Warren on a Wednesday afternoon, excited like someone who'd just found the perfect spot. "Dad, I booked a table for 8 at Riverside Grill for Thanksgiving. I thought it'd be nice to celebrate together this year at a special place." The silence on the other end lasted exactly 15 seconds. I counted because when you're waiting for a response that could change everything, every second matters. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold, almost businesslike. "Henry, we already have plans for the holiday. Barbara and I are having dinner at home with Hannah and her grandparents. No invitation, no, maybe next time. Just a door closing in my face." The whole conversation lasted less than 2 minutes, but every word was picked to sting. Warren explained it would be more intimate with just the close family, as if 22 years of being there didn't qualify me. Barbara got on the phone and mumbled something about maybe next year, but it was one of those promises you make when you just want someone to disappear. I hung up and stared at the reservation email in my inbox. Riverside Grill, table for 8, Thanksgiving, confirmed. The irony? I'd chosen 8 seats on purpose, even including Hannah's grandparents. Now I'd be sitting at a table for 8, with just one person. At that moment, something inside me didn't break. It crystallized. It was like all the little signs, all the cut-off conversations, all the fake smiles suddenly made perfect sense. They never saw me as a son. I was a charity project that happened to turn out well, an investment that was finally paying off, but never real family. The betrayal didn't come with yelling or drama. It came with the cold elegance of people who'd long decided your place in their family hierarchy. Warren didn't even try to soften the blow. Barbara didn't bother to pretend. They just dismissed me. I sat in my chair and opened the restaurant app to cancel the reservation. It would have been the smart thing, right? Avoid the awkwardness, save money, pretend none of this ever happened. But then my hand stopped over the cancel button. Why should I be the only one losing something here? Why did I have to swallow this in silence too? I closed the app and made a decision. I was going to that dinner, alone, and I had a feeling that night wouldn't end the way I expected. Thursday came faster than I expected. I woke up that Thanksgiving morning with a strange feeling. It wasn't anxiety. It wasn't sadness. It was something closer to resolve. For the first time in years, I wasn't worried about pleasing anyone or acting the right way. I had my breakfast in silence, put on my best dress shirt, and decided that if I was going to have dinner alone, I'd at least do it with dignity. Sometimes, when you stop trying to fit into the mold others made for you, you realize you have a shape of your own. And that shape was finally starting to emerge. On the drive to the restaurant, my mind was surprisingly calm. There was no inner voice making excuses for Warren and Barbara, no hope that maybe they'd change their minds at the last minute. It was like I'd finally accepted a truth I'd been avoiding for decades. They never truly saw me as their son. I parked the car and spent a few minutes watching families walk into the restaurant. Parents holding their kids' hands, grandparents smiling, that warm holiday vibe I had always been denied. But this time, instead of feeling jealous, I felt an odd kind of peace. The restaurant was packed just like I expected. Big families filled round tables, kids ran between chairs, and the air buzzed with that typical holiday energy. When I reached the host stand, the hostess gave me a curious look. "Reservation for how many?" I took a deep breath before answering. "Table for 8, but it's just me." She hesitated for a second, clearly confused, but walked me to a large table by the window. I sat facing the river view and, for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel awkward. I felt free. While waiting for the first course, I started mentally listing everything I had sacrificed trying to earn their approval. How many weekends I spent visiting when I would have rather been doing anything else. How many career decisions I made based on what I thought they'd approve of. How many times I swallowed hurtful comments just to keep the peace. The list was staggering. I'd lived 3 decades carrying this quiet adoption trauma, always trying to prove I deserved a spot at their table. I grabbed my phone and for the first time didn't feel the urge to text and ask how their dinner was going. The waiter brought out a plate of turkey that was honestly delicious, but I could barely focus on the food. Something different was happening inside me, a kind of clarity I'd never felt before. Maybe it was the first time I was actually processing my own thoughts without the constant pressure to be who they wanted me to be. I looked around and realized no one was judging me for eating alone. In fact, no one was even paying attention. It was like I'd just discovered that the stage I thought I'd been performing on my whole life wasn't even real. I was finishing dessert when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Henry? My boy, what are you doing here all by yourself?" I turned and nearly knocked over my water glass. It was Charles, my grandfather, standing there with a concerned smile. In all the scenarios I'd imagined for that night, seeing him there wasn't one of them. But something in the way he looked at me told me this conversation was about to reveal truths that would change everything I thought I knew about my own story. Charles walked over to the table with that slow, familiar stride, but there was something different in his eyes. A mix of concern and determination I'd never seen before. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, already pulling out the chair beside me. I nodded, still trying to process the shock of seeing him there. "Grandpa, how did you know I was here?" He took a deep breath before answering. "I didn't. I came to have dinner alone too, after a really ugly argument with Warren this morning. That caught me completely off guard. The waiter came by and Charles ordered just a coffee. As we waited, he sat in silence, nervously fiddling with something he'd brought, a small wooden box that looked like it had seen better days. "Henry," he began, his voice more serious than I'd ever heard it. "I need to tell you some things I should have told you a long time ago." My stomach twisted. Whenever someone starts a conversation like that, you know your world is about to change. What Warren and Barbara did to you, it's not just coldness, it's something much worse. He opened the box and pulled out a stack of yellowed documents, some with official seals. "These are records that came for you over the years. Your biological mother, Elizabeth, never stopped trying to reach out." I picked up one of the papers with shaking hands and read the heading. Department of Social Services, Attempted Family Contact. The stamp was dated 5 years ago. There were at least 15 documents there, all addressed to me, all intercepted. "They kept this from you for over 2 decades, Henry. Your mom never abandoned you." My grandfather's words echoed through my mind like thunder. 2 decades. 2 decades of letters and attempts I never knew existed, from a mother I thought had rejected me. I opened the most recent one with trembling hands. Request for family reunion. Elizabeth Campbell requests contact with Henry Cooper for emotional reunion. I stopped reading. I couldn't go on. The betrayal I felt from being left out of Thanksgiving seemed ridiculous compared to this. "There's more," Charles said, pulling a larger envelope from the box. "Elizabeth isn't just some nurse. She became the head of nursing at Seattle General Hospital. She's built an incredible life, Henry, and she's always wanted to share it with you." He showed me photos. A beautiful woman with brown hair at a graduation ceremony, receiving an award, smiling beside her colleagues. She never married, never had other children. You've always been her priority. Each picture hit like a punch to the gut. Charles took another breath before continuing. "Warren intercepted everything because he was afraid of losing you. He knew that if you found out Elizabeth wanted to see you, you'd leave, and he couldn't let that happen." I frowned, confused. But why would he care? They never really treated me like a son anyway. My grandfather shook his head sadly. "Because you were the perfect investment, Henry. A child they could shape, who'd be forever grateful, who'd never ask questions." That's when Charles told me the most shocking part. "Elizabeth didn't just send documents, she sent money too. A lot of money. For your education, your needs, to make sure you had everything you needed." He pulled out bank statements from the box. $15,000 a year, Henry. For 2 decades. $300,000 your biological mother sent to ensure you got the best education possible. My eyes widened. "Where's that money?" Charles closed his eyes for a moment. "Warren used it to remodel the house, buy new cars, pay for family vacations. He spent your mother's money and never told you." The restaurant around me started to spin. I felt like I was drowning in revelations. This wasn't just about hidden documents or lies. This was about theft, manipulation, and a conspiracy that had lasted for decades. Warren and Barbara hadn't just rejected me, they had built their entire life at my expense, literally. "That's a crime, isn't it?" I asked. Charles nodded solemnly. "At the very least, it's misappropriation of funds. Maybe fraud, too. Elizabeth could sue them, and she'd probably win." "But why didn't you ever tell me this before?" I asked, torn between gratitude and frustration. Charles lowered his eyes. "Because I'm a coward, Henry. Warren's my son, and I always hoped he'd change, that one day he'd do the right thing." He paused, voice trembling. "But when I saw you here tonight sitting alone in this restaurant," I picked up a few more documents and began reading. Elizabeth wrote about her career, how she thought about me every single day, how she had saved money to help me with anything I might need. She mentioned she had a spare apartment in Seattle, that I would always be welcome, that she'd respect whatever I decided about our relationship. "She sounds amazing," I murmured, more to myself than to Charles. "She is," he confirmed. "And she never gave up on you, Henry." I looked at my grandfather, this 75-year-old man who had carried this heavy secret for so long, and I felt a wave of respect and love for him. "What do I do now?" I asked. He smiled for the first time since sitting down. "You call her. Tonight. Elizabeth deserves to know you finally found out the truth." He pulled a piece of paper from the box. "This is her number. She's been waiting for your call for 2 decades. I looked at the paper in my hands and knew my life was about to take a completely different direction. I put all the documents back in the box, but I kept Elizabeth's number in my hand. "Grandpa, thank you for finally telling me. I know that couldn't have been easy." He nodded. "Warren's going to be furious when he finds out I told you. But you're my grandson, Henry, and I love you. Some things matter more than keeping the peace in a family." We finished our coffee in silence, both of us processing the weight of those revelations. As we walked out of the restaurant, I knew that the justice I never even realized I needed was finally within reach. I got home that night with the box of documents under my arm and Elizabeth's number burning in my pocket. I couldn't stop thinking about everything Charles had revealed. I sat in the living room chair holding my phone, staring at those numbers for 10 minutes. It was almost 10 p.m. in Kansas City, which meant 8 p.m. in Seattle. I took a deep breath and dialed. After 3 rings, a woman answered. "Hello?" Her voice was soft, warm, and somehow familiar. "Elizabeth? It's me, Henry." The silence on the other end lasted about 5 seconds, but it felt like forever. Then I heard a muffled sob. Henry? Oh my God, Henry, is it really you? The emotion in her voice was unmistakable. I just found out about the documents, the money, everything they kept from me. She took a deep breath. So many years, Henry. So many years trying to reach you. The conversation flowed naturally, like we were old friends reconnecting. She told me about her career, how she never stopped thinking about me, how she had always hoped for this call. We talked for 2 hours. Elizabeth told me she had kept an emergency fund for me, that there was always a room ready in her home, that she had never lost hope we'd reunite someday. Henry, I know this is sudden, but would you like to visit? I can send you a plane ticket tonight. Without hesitation, I answered, yes. I want to meet you. I want to learn about my real story. She cried with joy on the other end. I'll send the ticket now. Can you come this weekend? I agreed right away. For the first time in years, I felt like I was going home. The next day, I called my boss and requested a few days off. I didn't go into details, just said it was a family emergency. The ticket Elizabeth sent was for first class. She really wanted me to feel special. As I packed my suitcase, I wondered how I'd explain all this to my adoptive parents. Then I decided I wouldn't explain anything. They'd lost the right to know about my life the moment they stole decades of connection from me and my mom. I left a note on the fridge. Out of town for a few days, back Monday. The flight to Seattle was a mix of anxiety and anticipation. During the 3-hour trip, I read and reread all the documents Charles had given me. There were contact attempts going back to when I turned 18, requests to meet, even a letter where Elizabeth explained she had breast cancer a few years ago and desperately wanted to see me before it was too late. Thankfully, she had fully recovered, but the thought that I nearly missed meeting my mother broke me. My adoptive parents hadn't just stolen my money, they almost stole my chance at a real reunion with someone who truly loved me. Elizabeth was waiting at the airport with a bouquet of flowers and tears in her eyes. Our first hug was a little awkward, we were strangers after all. But after a few seconds, it turned into the warmest embrace I'd ever received. You look exactly like I imagined, she said, holding my face in her hands. You have your father's eyes. She told me my biological dad had died in a car accident when I was 2, and that she couldn't raise me alone at the time. I was only 19, Henry. I had no family support. I thought I was doing the right thing, giving you to a family that could give you stability. That weekend, Elizabeth showed me the home where I would have grown up if she had raised me. It was a cozy apartment with an ocean view, full of photos of me she had collected over the years, school pictures, graduation shots, some I didn't even remember taking. How did you get these? I asked. I paid a private investigator to keep me updated. I wanted to make sure you were okay, that you were being treated with love and respect. My heart broke. She cared about me from a distance, while my adoptive parents barely tolerated me up close. On Sunday, Elizabeth took me to the hospital where she worked. Her co-workers greeted her warmly and treated me like family. Elizabeth always talked about you, one nurse said. She's one of the most dedicated people I know, at work and as a mom. I watched my mother interact with her colleagues and patients, and I felt this overwhelming pride. This was the woman who gave birth to me, who never stopped loving me, who built a beautiful life while saving a space for me. And I almost never met her, because of two people's greed. On Monday morning, just before my flight home, Elizabeth handed me an envelope. This is for you, she said. It's what's left of the fund I saved for your education. It's not much, but it's yours by right. Inside was a check for $50,000 and a letter. My dear Henry, it read, these past 3 days have been the happiest of my life. I hope you'll consider moving to Seattle. I have an extra apartment. You can stay as long as you want, no pressure. I just want to make up for lost time with my son. I cried reading that letter. For the first time, someone wanted me around with no conditions, no expectations, no guilt. The flight back to Kansas City felt nothing like the one before. I wasn't anxious anymore. I was focused. I had a clear plan. Move to Seattle, start a new life with my mom, and cut all ties with the people who betrayed me. But before that, I had one last thing to do. Justice. They had stolen $300,000 that wasn't theirs, lied to me for decades, and nearly robbed me of a chance to reunite with my real mother. It was time they learned that some actions come with consequences you can't control. I got home Tuesday night with a clarity I had never felt before. There were no more doubts, no more attempts to justify their behavior. I sat at my computer and started writing a letter I should have written years ago. Warren and Barbara, I began, I've learned the truth about Elizabeth, about the money, about the lies you've built around me for so long. Every word flowed naturally. No anger, no drama, just cold facts and a final decision. This would be the last communication I'd ever have with them. In the letter, I explained everything Charles had revealed to me. The intercepted documents, the stolen money, the sabotaged attempts to contact me. You didn't just keep me from my mother, I wrote. You stole hundreds of thousands of dollars that weren't yours. That's called misappropriation. I didn't make threats or promise revenge. I simply said I was moving to Seattle and that they would never hear from me again. I signed it, Henry, not your son, not with love, just Henry. I printed the letter and put it in an envelope. Along with it, I included copies of all the documents Charles had given me, irrefutable proof of what they'd done. The next morning, I drove to the house I grew up in one last time. I rang the bell, and Barbara answered with that same forced smile. Henry, what a surprise. How was your trip? I handed her the envelope. Read this. You have 24 hours to process what's inside. After that, I want no further contact. I turned and walked away, ignoring the Henry, wait, echoing behind me. Back at my apartment, I started packing. I didn't have much to take, just the things that actually mattered. Clothes, a few books, my computer. The rest was just baggage from a life I no longer wanted. I called my boss and handed in my resignation, telling him I was moving to another city. He was surprised but respectful. You've always been a model employee, Henry. If you ever change your mind, the door's open. I thanked him, knowing I'd never return. Around 4 p.m., my phone rang. It was Warren. I picked up on the first ring. Henry, we need to talk. Come home now. His voice was different, not commanding, but almost pleading. There's nothing left to talk about, I replied calmly. Everything I needed to know is clear now. He started rambling about misunderstandings, how they'd always loved me, how I was misinterpreting everything. I hung up mid-sentence. Some conversations are just noise, and I had stopped listening. An hour later, they showed up at my door. Warren was red with anger, Barbara was crying. Henry, you can't do this to us, we're your family, Warren yelled. I opened the door, just a crack. You were never my family. You were my captors. Barbara tried to push the door open. We raised you. We gave you everything. I gave a cold smile. You gave me what was already mine, paid with my mother's money. You gave me nothing. I shut the door in their faces and locked it. The shouting lasted 10 more minutes. Then silence. That night I got a message from Elizabeth. Henry, how are you? I hope your return went smoothly. I told her everything that had happened. She was worried, but proud. You did the right thing, my son. Some bridges need to burn so we can build new paths. We talked for an hour, planning my permanent move. She had already prepared the apartment, reached out to a few contacts about job leads. For the first time, I felt like someone genuinely cared about my future. On Friday, a lawyer called me. Mr. Cooper, I represent Warren and Barbara Cooper. They'd like to resolve this matter amicably. I nearly laughed. What matter? I simply found the truth and chose to cut contact. There's nothing to resolve. The lawyer insisted there were misunderstandings, that we could work things out. Tell your clients that if they try to contact me again, I'll sue for misappropriation and harassment. I have all the evidence I need. I hung up. They finally understood this wasn't a bluff. On Saturday, Hannah called me. My adoptive sister was crying. Henry, please don't do this. Mom and Dad are devastated. They made mistakes, but they love you. I took a deep breath before responding. Hannah, I like you. You were always kind to me. But your parents stole a fortune from my mom and denied me the right to know her for decades. That's not a mistake. It's a crime. She went quiet. I didn't know about the money. Well, now you do. And now you understand why I can't be part of that family anymore. On Sunday, I loaded the last of my things into the car and got ready to leave. No tears, no sadness, just relief. Before I left, I got one last message from Warren. "Henry, if you ever change your mind, you'll always have a place here." I didn't reply. I started the car and headed toward the airport. My new life in Seattle was waiting for me, and for the first time in 30 years, I felt like I was going toward people who truly wanted me. The respect I'd always longed for was finally within reach, and I realized that true justice doesn't always come from courts or revenge. It comes from choosing who deserves a place in your life. 6 months later, I was sitting on the balcony of my apartment in Seattle, having breakfast with a view of the Puget Sound. Elizabeth lived in the unit next door, and our morning routine had become sacred. Coffee together, chatting about the day's plans, and sometimes just sharing a comfortable silence. I had landed a job as a financial analyst at a local company, and for the first time in my life, going to work didn't feel like a burden. It was strange how simple life could be when you were surrounded by people who genuinely cared. I no longer felt that constant need to prove myself. I simply existed, and that was enough. Elizabeth and I had created a rhythm that honored our emotional reunion in a healthy way. We had lunch together twice a week. She told me stories about my childhood I'd never heard, and I shared my plans for the future. I discovered she had an amazing sense of humor and a love for gardening. Little things that made me feel connected to her in a way I had never experienced. We weren't trying to make up for lost time all at once. Instead, we were building something new, one day at a time. The adoption trauma I had carried for decades was finally healing through her unconditional love. Last week, I received a letter from Hannah. She wrote that Warren and Barbara were facing serious financial trouble. Apparently, they had relied more on the money they stole than I realized. "They ask about you every day," she wrote, "and hope you'll find it in your heart to forgive them." I read the letter twice, placed it in a drawer, and felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, no satisfaction, just indifference. It felt like she was writing about strangers I met a long time ago. Some people spend their whole lives chasing revenge, but I had learned that real justice is sometimes simply not caring anymore. This morning, Elizabeth gave me a gift, a framed photo of me as a baby in her arms at the hospital. "I've kept this for 30 years, she said, "waiting for the day I could give it to you." I looked at the photo and saw my young mother, smiling through tears, holding her newborn son. There was no pain in that image, just pure love. I placed the photo on my nightstand and realized that for the first time in my life I had a real family. Not a family that tolerated me or treated me like a project, but a family that chose me every single day. And most importantly, I had chosen her too. And now I turn to you. Yes, you, the one who stayed with me through this entire journey. Have you ever experienced something like this in your own family? Ever had relatives try to control your life or dealt with family rejection? Share your story in the comments. I want to hear how you handled the lack of respect in your family environment. If this story touched you in any way, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Every week, I share real stories of people who turned family betrayal into a chance to rebuild through emotional justice. Just like I learned that some battles are won by choosing who deserves a place in your life, you can discover that your true emotional reunion and personal worth are more powerful than any attempt to diminish you.